welcome to Wellness Wednesday with Donna Christensen and Linda Dorman, myself. We are so happy to be back. We've had a little bit of a hiatus the
Yeah,
last couple of weeks and now back and really happy to have this conversation, but really happy to see you, Donna. How are things going?
yes, great, great. Very busy as we were talking about earlier. Um, this week is a little bit easier than last week, but everything's going well.
Going well. Well, that's what we like to hear, particularly on the health, wellness, and lifestyle show
Yeah, yeah.
on this
What
Wednesday.
about you?
That things are going well. It's, come through the spring and we wait for all the beautiful leaves to, heal the earth as far as I'm concerned and just really de-stress. So that's what our little hiatus has been about, taking a much deserved vacation. My first since before COVID. Can you imagine that?
Yeah,
It
that's
was
great.
wonderful. And, there's so many topics. As I was on vacation, I was thinking about so many health topics that we really need to cover going forward. We've talked a lot about mental health. We've talked a lot about things like sickle cell,
Mhm.
some forms of cancers, just mental health, behavioral health, and just policies that impact on healthcare. And of course, we have one of the biggest policy issues that are coming up before the Supreme Court, and
Oh my
that is the reversal of Wade versus Roe. My mind just can't grapple with why are we spending time with legislation and laws that have served us for many, many years when we have so many things before us that we need to get off the table and into some legislative,
Yeah,
funnel all the
it's
way to the
really unfortunate that Congress really didn't. We felt very comfortable that the Roe versus Wade decision had set a strong precedent. It was well established and so forth, and that it was never going to go away. And so we did not legislate it. And
yes.
now here we are. Um, so I hope that we can get Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski to vote with us so that, because it will be on the floor soon. And if that happens, we can probably get it passed. It's going to be really hard.
Well, it remains to be seen, and there's lots of great programming here on our TV network, which I just want to make sure that our listening and viewing audience knows how to reach the Our Network TV, and that is on Roku Live or Roku, Amazon Fire Stick, uh, Android TV, as well as Apple TV, and WSTX Radio, Bloomberg Radio out of the US Virgin Islands. So we just wanted to make sure that we put those calls out there so people will know all the fantastic platforms that we are broadcasting from. So let's bring on our guests. We have
Yes.
today kind of a different conversation today regarding health, wellness, and lifestyle. Maybe it's kind of all mashed up together when we talk about schools and what's happening inside of U.S. American schools, particularly public schools. And we talk about with the undertone of health, wellness, and lifestyle. How do we get our kids through this thing called adolescence
Adolescents. Yeah.
within the high schools?
And
And so
it's not as easy as it was when we were going through that stage.
it really, really wasn't. So we have an amazing guest with us today, Calvin Bridgers, who is the CEO and president of, or founder of, I love the title because it's a great play on your name, Bridge to Life LLC. Behavioral health and education consulting company working directly with local governments, school districts, families to establish effective strategies specific to the demands of the population being served. And so Calvin comes to us with a bachelor's of science in biology and a master's in science education physics, wow, and works with a number of nonprofits throughout the year. And we just welcome you. One of your major cornerstones of your career is that you've spent a great deal of time in leadership within schools as principals, administrators, coach, and really leaders in the classroom. And that is our amazing teachers to really help affect change. So, welcome to the Health, Wellness, and Lifestyle Program with Donna Christensen and Linda Dorman.
Yes,
Thank
welcome.
you so much. Thank you so much for having me. Now I apologize. I'm just realizing I'm speaking to the Donna Christensen.
Yes,
So
you are.
I am really honored I didn't know. You surprised me, Linda. Well, now you don't surprise me anymore. You don't
I don't
surprise me.
surprise you. This is the Honorable Donna Christensen.
Yeah.
So we're
No,
delighted. And she's
yes.
broadcasting out of her home country, well, not country,
In
but
the
home
Virgin Islands.
region of the
Ah,
U.S. Virgin Islands, St. Croix to be specific. So don't we all wish you were down there?
But we're
yes.
really
It's
interested to hear about Bridges to Life, is it?
Bridges to Life.
bridge
For,
to life.
why
Yeah.
don't you share a little bit about what you do, Kelvin, as we start talking about some of the things that you have seen from your perspective? How do we get our arms wrapped around a number of different health issues, particularly in the mental behavioral health arena? But we've talked about social determinants as well that feed and come into the school environment that creates what has just come out as a report on the United States educational system. 18 reasons why it is actually failing, is the opinion of some. So before we start diving into that list, let's talk about what you have done in your business.
Well, I mean, we've done a number of things. My experience and my background is in public education. I've served Baltimore City Public Schools for over 27 years, mostly on the ground in terms of being inside of schools. Um, as a teacher, I basically held every possible position that there are in schools, and including the principalship in elementary, middle, and in high school. And I've actually watched the transformation, so to speak, particularly in Baltimore City Public Schools, and when I began in 1992. So, when I look at the things that are occurring, and I'm not far removed from Baltimore City Public Schools, but I'm just looking at a lot of major things and adjustments, particularly behind the pandemic that has occurred, and really what we are looking at in terms of Bridge to Life is to look at the social emotional component, create something, help support to create something effective that makes sense for schools in terms of dealing with students that may be, there's different effects that has come from the pandemic, and sort of looking at what that looks like. But in a more strategic manner, I would suggest, for instance, there are a lot of programming that people may attempt to put in place in order to really try to resolve the issues that are occurring with learning loss and things of that nature that have occurred during the pandemic. But more so to speak, is really about developing really strategic components based on what are the dynamics of the school, the demographics, and the population. For instance, when you look at some of the data, when you start looking at how has COVID affected learning, and sometimes even what has government and things of that nature and school boards, what have been their impact, and it's really it's contradictory data. If you try to look at it on a broader scale, because depending upon what decisions were made, how were they made, were they made for the best interest of that particular community and things of that nature, and the fact of the data from your school district, how much of a learning loss did it affect you? How much would your standardized assessments affected during that particular time? What is you find information that is almost specific to individualistic schools, school districts, and the plan that individuals such as CEOs of school districts, as well as principals that are given school-based management on the ground, have been able to put together along with community resources in order to sort of maintain and not lose as much learning throughout the pandemic, even though it has occurred.
It has occurred. It's been pretty significant, as a matter of fact, where I'm just not clear what our students going forward will do. This was a recovery year. And I wonder how well that students and administrators and teachers, and I won't add the parents just yet in the conversation, but rebounding, because in some schools districts, as you mentioned, there's this generalization that business as usual. We came back from the summer and we went back into school as if the pandemic never happened. And of course, that certainly did not bode very well, I am sure, in many schools. In your business, you've probably seen some of the challenges, post, virtual learning, not just in learning deficiencies, but just in behavioral issues and teacher burnout and administrators who are hop skipping around policies and procedures and rules in order to just to flex and be agile around what they're seeing in the school systems. All of that seems combustible. into something that doesn't fit the learning model in the US, and maybe that's the impact.
And so, because we're all experiencing this, and this is being heard on radio in the Virgin Islands as well,
Mhm.
what are some of the things that school systems are doing to try to bring the children's educational level back to where it ought to be? Are
Yeah.
there special
Well,
programs to try to mitigate the loss that everybody has been seeing because of the virtual learning during the pandemic?
yes, 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 they are. There's been um, uh, that have from the federal government that has gotten to the local school districts. And some of the programming and planning is a combination of things such as extended learning time. So going into next school year, some schools will, instead of getting out doing the normal hours, will extend their school day so students get a little bit more time on task. Additionally,
Mhm.
there's summer programming, of course, that should be automatic, I would be suggesting, and even used in combination with the extended school day because it kind of boils down to time on task. Obviously, we
Mhm.
know in most situations that the data shows that kids in person do better, they perform better academically than the online, even though there are percentages of online kids that do well. But when you look at the overall numbers, it's the in-person piece that really makes the difference, the total social engagement and the other components that go along with, the regular things that should be occurring to develop young people in schools. So
Mhm.
definitely those are two of the combinations that should happen. Another component is tutoring. And
Mhm.
so, that's one of the components that we at Bridge to Life have developed as well, particularly in mathematics. But what we're looking at is really high stakes tutoring. So, you have different levels of tutoring that you want to bring into schools. However, if you're not having if a kid is not being seen at least 3 times a week, on a consistent basis, you're not serious about it. There's been programming out in actually in LA, where there was a program where ninth grade students, regardless of their middle school performance, they were given a tutor, very high stakes. This is 4 to 5 times a week for almost the entire school year. And the
Wow.
difference that you saw in that data in terms of an explosion. So there was that's what you call high stakes. Now, obviously, you're going to have to put your money where your mouth is. But there's been that funding is there. A lot of school districts already share what they're doing with their funding, and you know, a lot of them are putting a certain percentage of funding in that tutoring piece. Particularly if you can have the tutoring model right beside the school model, side by side. I think along with summer learning and extended learning, you can make progress. There's no guarantees. Kids, in terms of psychological learning and things of that nature, they transition at their own pace. We would like to be able to determine what it is, but some of the effects for kids in the loss of learning may be a little bit different for others. But I think with those components in place, I think there should be some form of progress, and that's what some of the folks are doing.
That
That's
sounds like what you would expect would be helpful.
and I think also, if I'm not mistaken, Calvin, there's been some additional in-school services that were not there last year or even years prior before the pandemic, and that is a whole new level of counseling, not just your counselors, but trained social workers, contractors that are in the school systems that are there in order to supplement the counseling services, counseling, kind of behavioral, regular in school issues. But this is deeper, where you actually have your therapeutic environments already embedded in the school systems. And I would imagine that those are new or extended services. Have you experienced that? And was that something that was available in the schools that you led in Baltimore? Because Baltimore really is a great sampling of what's happening in a lot of public schools across the country. It was a very, as you've mentioned, very troubling school district, very challenging, but you came in as a turnaround king. So there's always that opportunity to see something rise from the ashes of, issues that kids go through, because indeed they are our future. That's the cliche. That's what we talk about. But this extra layer of counseling services, what do you think about, and how do we view that as parents? How do we even access that information? is a whole nother matter. But it would seem to me that those are extended services as well to help address the question that you had, Donna. How do we improve educational outcomes for kids? I think,
You know,
what do you
I'm
think
sorry,
about
go ahead.
that first? And then I have another thought as well.
Well, I think that one of the buzzwords that's happening in education around the world is SEL, social emotional learning. Really trying to attempt to deal with some of the trauma induced communities of students, and that's from around the world. I've had the opportunity actually to work model. It's the community school model. It's a model that has been around in this country probably for probably the last maybe 10 years or so. Even though that model of empowering the entire community in order to be a part of the educational process, and also to provide resources for children and families in that particular school community, has been one of the effective components that we've seen, along with that social emotional piece. For an example, um, as principal at Samuel Coleridge Taylor Elementary School, which is actually in the poorest neighborhood or community in Baltimore, according to surveys in terms of things such as education for parents, average income for household, single parent households compared to two parent household, all other types of economic factors. And one of the things that we decided to do is within that model is to bring in community partners, such as companies that deal with mental health, particularly around young people, being able to provide safe places for young kids or children or whomever, in case that there is that need, including adults as well. So being able to provide that type of thing, because when you look at working particularly in communities that we identify as trauma induced, because of the things that the children in the community actually get a chance to witness and are a part of on a daily basis. And that's why that whole holistic approach to being able to reach out to the children and their families as well, to try to provide resources, have been one that many have found to be effective in our country. So that social emotional piece, it's been able to add to things such as lowering the percentage of suspensions or referrals. If you
Mhm.
create a model in which kids feel comfortable, and it is a part of the school culture, that a child can be able to access services at any time in a structured manner, and not in a disruptive manner, it becomes a part of the school. I mean, what children have to do to be successful there and not be disruptive in terms of seeking help and support. They know that it's there. Then you can begin to develop effective models around it. Now, you do see a large percentage of mental health organizations inside of schools. For
Mhm.
instance, as partners, not really costing any funding, and it's not really that difficult to develop. I know when we were at Samuel Coleridge Taylor, we had a partnership with the University of Maryland School of Social Work. So they gave us an opportunity to have access to um, interns, being able to really get into the community and see what was going on inside of people's homes and things of that nature. And I think that's the extent that particular model needs to be reaching into, not just children in school, but being able to reach into the community, look at some of the issues that are plaguing families, and the fact that those issues are being brought to school by young people. And if we can try to create a positive uh, component as best we can to supporting that nucleus family for kids. Happy home, happy child. We used to always say, and a happy child will do happy work, and then teachers are a little bit more happy, and then we get happy test scores. And so that's kind of how we looked at it. And that's why it was important to really go inside of the community. So when you look at that community school model, I'm not going to talk too long, but in that community school model, you have things such as we had a GED program inside of the school. so parents could drop their kids off at school and go right upstairs and be educated a couple of times a week.
Wow.
These are things that you can create in your mind, and you can put things together. You don't need a lot of money to do a lot of different things, but if you do have support and funding, obviously that would make sense. And schools have a lot of funding right now. It's about the creativity of the model that they develop, and so that's kind of what Bridge to Life does as well. We help to kind of strategize based on the needs of the community, the services that you may require, or just to help you strategically look at what are the demographic groups, what do the people in my community need? Do they need expungement for parents that may be in the home that have had situations in the past and they're trying to get themselves together? What type of other things that you can create those hubs inside of schools, food pantries, and etc. There are a lot of different things that you can put included in school, early child care. Even Head Start now you're seeing in a lot of elementary schools as well to try to prepare students. So I think that if you're creative and smart and you're looking at things from, a long range, middle and short range goals, and what would be the immediate impact to support children and family and to build a positive, strong culture school, then I think that those are some of the things that you should be looking at in regards to that, not just having mental health people in your building. If it's not a structural model and a part of what you do, and outside entities working along with school entities, which sometimes is a struggle, because I've seen that just between being from the outside as a strong leader, you have to make sure that that exists in your school for the children that you serve and the community that you serve. And I think you'll begin to see some progress in some areas.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, you can never talk too long about something that impacts our children. The social emotional learning, it's so interesting because way back in the day, I used to work with the Yale School of Medicine, specifically the Child Studies Center, where this social emotional learning was birthed, and now we have this thing that has called transformational social emotional learning. And I love that, involving the kids, involving the teachers, involving the school model, but it's circling all of that with the community, because community is a vital part of this entire process. If you divorce your schools and disassociate community, meaning community partners and a whole host of governmental services and even ecumenical community, the schools in partnership with the churches in that community, where the house of worships, trying to create a full comprehensive solution that will in fact do what you're asking, Donna, and that is to improve outcomes for children. And that's all we're seeking to do, and create a viable work environment for those who come in and educate our children.
The community, bringing the community and making them a part of the effort is really very important, because what happens in the community is what is affecting your children and their ability to learn. And the communities that we're talking about in Baltimore, some here, one that I'm probably getting ready to work with in a little while, have a lot of needs.
Yes.
And
well, we're going to talk about some of those needs.
All of that is somewhat traumatic to the children and affect their ability to learn. Even if they can't get a good breakfast, it affects their ability to learn.
Well, we hope that they can get a good
breakfast. It affects their ability to learn because too much is going on outside. So the community involvement is critical. And
yes.
It's good to hear that it's happening.
And that it's in a structured framework. Well, Calvin, we're going to be right back. We're going to take a quick break with the Health, Wellness, and Lifestyle. Your host, Linda Dorman, and Donna, Dr. Donna Christensen, the Dr. Donna Christensen, right here on our TV, on Roku, Amazon Fire Stick, and Android Fire Stick, and WSTX, Bloomberg Radio. We'll be right back and have some more conversation with Calvin Bridger.
I'm Charles Meriday, and I'm in the restaurant business. In my 20 years as a chef and restaurant owner, I've been able to work and eat in some of the great kitchens around the globe. There's a whole side of the restaurant that most people will never get to see. So now, I want to take you to the back of the house, into kitchens of some of the best chefs in the world. Along the way, I'll share some of my own tips and recipes so you can cook like a pro too. So join me in the back of the house for a whole new perspective on cooking and food. Order in. Roger. Serve it, please.
Bona Club.
I'm glad that you came. Please.
Well, welcome back to the Health, Wellness, and Lifestyle Program with the Honorable Dr. Donna Christensen and Linda Dorman, and our special guest today, Calvin Bridgers of Bridge to Life LLC, an educational advocacy consulting firm. I just gave you a whole new title in your business. I just decided to do that, Calvin. But to suffice to say, you have extreme experience as an educator, a coach, even a radio host yourself, as well as a principal administrator of some of the toughest high schools in the country in Baltimore, Maryland. And you had mentioned something earlier that the social emotional learning, and I think it's important that we at least give a little bit more conversation to what that actually entails when we think about social emotional learning, because there's been a lot of connectivity to critical race theory and why there's been so many challenges, particularly in our southern schools or in our urban-based schools, around critical race thinking, modeling, learning, theory, as well as practices. But we won't go so deep into that. But I think it's important that we talk about the 5 components of SEL, and that is what I know as, just through research, self-awareness is one. And, I think that goes without saying. Calvin, what would you say to that?
Can I just piggyback just to ask, because already even in some of our schools, we're having conflicts and some fights and things like that. If you use any specific conflict resolution programs in your school as a part of it, you get to talk as long as you want. So
yes,
there will be a lot of questions.
Well, yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of different strategies that schools and districts are using. Restorative practices is a mechanism that's used by schools to try to, divert situations that that possibly can occur, and in some cases, things that have occurred. They have a circle approach to sitting down and resolving the issue, and really talking about how people feel, how they felt during these processes and things of that nature. And it has a protocol to it, and it's been found to be effective as well. They have different measures around these situations that are occurring. But I think that there are some more in-depth things that have to be in place, when you start talking about all of these solutions, because everybody wants to grab a solution because we need a solution. And I think that we still must take a holistic approach and really see what the design of these schools, situations, circumstances, protocols, structures, how you provide order in your school, what's important for kids to do, how's it being enforced. Because I think one of the major things that I think that sometimes almost overlooked is around teacher training, administrative training, and modeling of what you expect inside of your school. Example would be something as simple as, if you want children to have a certain tone of respect in communicating with you, teachers, administrators, or whomever adults in that building should be referring to them as they want to be referred to. Now, my first principalship, I was at an all boys public charter school, and what we did, we said yes sir, no ma'am to everyone in the school, as adults as well as young people. We modeled the expectation. So when you talk about teacher training for social emotional, the whole concept, when you break down all five of them, Linda, it's going to bring you to really a positive self-reflect, positive how you see yourself in situations and how you can respond because of the way you can look at things, and how you're supported, how people make you feel good about the things that are happening around you, praising those components about you that are good, and really having a positive approach to even working with you on the things that you need to be improving upon. And that's from an adult to a young person perspective. But I think that there's so many different moving pieces to this that, when you say, like, what can we do to, cut down on these fights? Well, we need to know what's going on in the lives of young people as well. We need to have some forms of communication and mechanisms that will be able to make us aware. Because, for instance, if you're in an environment where it's extremely tough in terms of the culture, the neighborhoods, and the community, and kids are not snitching, they're not going to tell on one another and things of that nature, guess what? You can still build trust in those communities because somebody's going to tell them. Somebody wants to have a good school, and if they know that people will do things about stuff when they find out about it and try to resolve it fairly and things of that nature, which lends itself to leadership, then that has a huge bearing on how your school is operating, what it'll look like. What does and I don't want to talk too much, Linda, but what does the student teacher engagement component look like? If you have a school where there are things that are going on in your school that divert children from having ample time and negative energy and things like that, then I think that along with strong protocols, a no nonsense approach, and just people have to know up front what they're going to be dealing with. I'm sorry, when I was a principal of the school, I really was extremely disappointed with anyone that would put their hands on someone else when they know that there are mechanisms in place that we could have resolved this by. And, having that type of mindset from a leadership perspective in terms of engaging with young people and things of that nature as well, and providing ample opportunities for kids to be able to express themselves or feel that they're in a safe enough or trusting enough environment to get to an adult if they have an issue. That was one of our mottos: if you have a problem, get to an adult. And so, those types of things, I'm not trying to just say that everything I did as a principal was right, because fights did occur, but we did see decreases, of course, in that type of data. For instance, so far in 2021, you're talking about the increase of school violence, particularly after COVID. You're talking about 249 cases of guns being in schools throughout this country. 9 of those situations were active shooters in schools. That's 2021. That's 2021. So there's some serious things that you have to be aware of when you are in leadership in a school, because the expectation is you have to be taking care of people's children. You know, that
Yeah.
is your job, to protect
That's
the,
right.
and the adults in that building. And
And
you
my
have to make
grandchildren.
sure you have things in place, because you also, as a veteran principal, I had young teachers in there who, you still, they expect, their parents expect for them to be, safe as well in their working environment. So there's a lot of responsibility, and I think that we need to take a serious approach into looking at overall safety, the mental health component, all the self-awareness, not just for children but for adults. If you're in a school building, and I'm gonna keep it practical with you today, if you're in a
Mhm.
school building and you're a young student, let's say a young male African American student, and you're walking down the hallway, okay? On the other side of the hallway, there's a teacher walking in the opposite direction. Now, suppose the
Mhm.
teacher doesn't open their mouth to even say good afternoon, good morning, how you doing today, things of that nature. What does that do for a school culture? What does that kid feel like? Do they feel like that they're in the culture that they may see when they're outside, in their own community where people don't necessarily speak when they're walking down the hallway? Or they're in a culture where people are treating them the way that it should be expected, being courteous and things of that nature, modeling the same types of behavior that you expect. And I'm telling you, something as simple as that happens every day in schools. And it has an effect on developing school culture. When you start talking about self-awareness, it's adults having self-awareness as well for the things
Mhm.
that they project to young people, in order to be able to keep something at a place where, what the good things make sense in our school. This is what makes sense for us. And things are going to occur. But I think those types of things, in terms of looking at self-awareness as a part of the SEL component, is huge for adults and children.
Can I just give you a clap for that? I mean, like really, that just makes me so excited because you're right. Something as simple as good morning, young Mr. So and so or young Miss So and so, that models that conversation that starts with that salutation. I mean, it's really important because they may never even hear the word good morning or anything a positive. I remember watching a video in which the principal had walked in the first day and there was a huge fight and it just continued. But one thing she always said over the loudspeaker is, if no one loves you, know that I do, because she felt that that might be the only time in that day or that time in that week, even, or maybe even as far as month, that that child may even hear an adult say, I love you. And those kinds of affirmations became life changing, transformational. The kids, grabbed onto that as their mind absorbed it in a very positive and consistent way. So I think that that really helps with that next one, is that self-management of SEL, to be able to learn how to self-regulate and be able to manage your own behavior, because you've seen that in that culture. I think culture in schools is certainly overlooked. This is a conversation that's why I had to give you a clap, snap, high five, whatever we got to do, because that conversation does not come out when you are a parent and you don't ask, what's the culture of your school? You go in and ask, what's the academic program standards? What's the academic opportunities? What are the programs for my kids to learn? But never really put yourself in a posture of asking, what is the culture? So that was a brilliant conversation right there. I hope our listeners and our viewers really grab hold of that and put to task what is happening in your school that models positive personal life skills, both from the teacher interactions with each other, as well as student to administrators and faculty interactions and staff interactions, from the custodians all the way up to the top administrators. It all makes a difference. It's an ecosystem inside that school. What strikes me when you talk about that is, in the SEL, really kind of using that as the framework, relates to boys in school, because this is where we have a real challenge with America's boys inside of our public schools in particular, knowing already the numbers of graduates are less than women, knowing that they have a higher percentage of suicide as compared to girls, knowing that there is a large potential pipeline from high school dropout to prison, to trying to become then returning citizens if into society, if they get that opportunity, versus not. What has been your thoughts, opinions, experiences in looking at just this particular subset, the boys inside of our schools? How do we get a hold of these young men and create fantastic men who are really committed to improving the lives of others just like yourself.
Woo.
Woo, that's a big subject, isn't it?
Well,
We got some
yes,
time.
yes, and it's it's an extremely important one, uh, as well. And when you look at the demographics, of children of color in school, but particularly African American boys in school, and we're leading the way in all of the negative categories, from dropout to suspension rates, and low academic achievement and things of that nature. And there have been some great models that have been developed around the country, but this is a serious concern, and it should be more of a serious concern for more school districts. And it concerns me greatly when normally, as a teacher, as a principal, your practice would be to really look at what that data is saying to you. And
Mhm.
as in a school district, if you're seeing that the data in terms of African American males is some of the data that is the lowest in your district, it seems as though that you would be looking specifically at initiatives from a school district wide perspective to
Mhm.
ensure that African American males, or whatever the lower categories are, which they are, what they are
Mhm.
as well. But I think that something needs to be done specifically African American males from that level as well, with a demand that here's some of the things that we need to see in schools for these young men. And you have to have the guts, as a CEO, to make that decision. It's something that you look at. The data is clear, so make a decision. And there are some places that CEOs have made those decisions, but I think it should be a standard across the board. If the data tells you that's where the support is needed, then you should be following the data, as I've heard so often. But the other thing is that how do you engage, young African American males, and how do you educate them properly, and how do they understand the same, mannerisms and social norms that are deemed acceptable, and young men be able to be developed, molded into solid gentlemen,
Yeah.
someone that is that has ideas, and be able to make their ideas come true, focus on what they're doing, and learn how to conduct themselves and know how to conduct themselves in different places and different times when they're in those situations. And what does that modeling look like? Why is that not a part of school either way? Again, we keep talking about school, um, culture. I mean, we have to, this has to be done. Okay. So I've had the opportunity to be with a great model that was written by a great group of men. Dr. Kurt Gaddy, Edwin Johnson, both are deceased, Carl Stokes, city councilman here in Baltimore, and
Mhm.
um, and another gentleman that put together all boys public charter school in Baltimore. It was the first um, all boys charter school in the state of Maryland. And it was a
Mhm.
model of just boys from the neighborhood, no academic component necessarily to it, no academic criteria, I'm sorry, for
Mhm.
the kids to be actually coming to the school. But, these gentlemen were they were like amongst the first African Americans to attend parochial schools in the 60s and things of that nature in Baltimore. And so as a result, they sort of developed this model around a lot of the social components of the uniform component and that parochial perspective. And
Yeah.
they created Blueford Drew Jemison was the STEM Academy. We focus more so on STEM, robotics, mathematics, and things of that nature. And we actually blew it out of the water academically for our young people, and won national awards as well. But the whole modeling component of what was expected for every adult and for every child in their school was crystal clear, and it was enforced. And so we saw a large percentage, a 70+% of those boys going to high schools of choice, that
Mhm.
they had the academic aptitude, and they had performed that way on the standardized tests and academically to
Mhm.
qualify for those schools. So it can be done. and I've had the opportunity along with a great group of men who put together a great program, but it wasn't a basic program. It operated from 7 to 7. So the kids didn't leave school until 7 o'clock and they had already had dinner. So we had everything from, academics was at the part of after school programs every day, Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, and Thursdays. The other 2 days you were into clubs or sports. So we had everything there for kids and we fed them every day. And what we did see is an increase in academics for our school. We saw the improvement of students raising their levels academically, as well as that whole social component with expectations. When you put 300 middle school boys in a school, don't you think that somebody's going to step on somebody's foot, somebody's going to push somebody's going to do something that middle school boys do, And for some reason, somehow they don't always tell the truth. Not at least on the first time, but then eventually they get it right. Eventually they do get it right. And so in that, you find a culture that lends itself to the importance of being honest, those integral things, and being in the school on time, being dressed properly, all those different little simplistic components that in some cases I'm not necessarily saying that you have to have a uniform school for kids to be able to behave, because kids having freedom to wear what they want is the same as long as the culture lends itself to a place where kids feel safe, they want to perform. And if they're having issues and concerns, they feel as though they can come to an adult and get some resolve. Too many times kids are walking around with not having that opportunity to do so. So we had that same social emotional piece even back then of a partnership with clinicians that were in our school building. And actually what changed my mind about it was a young man that I saw walking in the hallway one day. And I'm saying, excuse me, sir, I'm trying to figure out why you're out in the hallway, which should be in your academic class. And he said to me, he said, Mr. Bridges, I need to see Miss Tiffany. And so I'm saying to myself, who is Miss Tiffany? I don't even remember. Didn't even remember that the program had been established to the point where, kids could actually go to these same places doing school. And I was like, because I had some concerns with this young man in the past. And so he was trying to self-regulate himself. He was trying to get to a place where he was frustrated, a safe place where he could communicate with someone to avoid those negative types of things that happen with having to disrupt in the class and having to go to an office, really trying to do the right thing. So I just, again, think that whole entire model and along with understanding what is important for young men. On the academic side, it was actually some brain research that we did as well, looking at the middle school boy, and the African-American child as well, and looking at the time span. How many times have you seen young people just daydream? They're not really disrespecting you or what they're saying. The brain research tells us sometimes the brain just takes a break. Now, I'm just trying to say I'm not a young spring chicken. I'm not a middle school kid by far, and I don't want to really listen to somebody talk for an hour, or whatever the case may be. So, I think when you talk about brain research, even if you're engaging in activities, sometimes young people at that age seem to daydream off, and so we cut our academic day down to 40 minutes based on some of the research. And so we give them 40-minute blocks, even if we take a break and come back to it again. But, just looking at the overall things, the brain research, what does that community actually lend itself to, being a part of those things that are in the community as well. And what are the things that you think that African-American boys think they're important for their development as well? Having an open dialogue, listening to young people. Some of the things have changed. Our kids, they want to be millionaires. They want to be millionaires. I mean, you hear that a lot, and we've even had talks about the fact of so many young millionaires under the age of 25, since the internet and things of that nature. And our kids deserve the opportunity as well, So when you start looking at, careers and things of that nature, it has to start early. From elementary school up to the middle school, that communication has to be there on a positive perspective. It's not that a kid should not feel as though they have to go through school, and when they meet one teacher in high school after they haven't had that nurturing component as a part of their educational development, as well as other types of things that you expect personal growth and development in schools to be occurring. I think that's a part of our job. And I think when we try to separate just the educational part from those other things, it creates something that we can't handle. I know when I went to school, and I know that even when I first started as a teacher in 1992 at Walbrook High School, it was predominantly African American students as well as staff. And folks didn't play with young people. They knew what they were supposed to do, and they gave them those consistent expectations. And they also loved them, and they communicated with them. And they didn't mind saying, "You look very nice today," or "I love your smile." Things to help peel back layers from young people after some of the things that you may not even know that they had to
Well,
see. This
well,
whole
Kevin,
concept of and all that stuff is nothing new about it for people
so
that really care.
Kevin, before we need to take a break in just a few seconds, I want to make sure people know, how do we reach you? We have to end up in just like seconds.
I'm just hoping that some of our educators were listening to this program today, and we may have to have Anthony play it again for them, because I know a lot of school systems, not only in the Virgin Islands but other places, can use this information.
And I know
Absolutely.
a lot of them are doing. I don't think I'm reinventing anything right here. I think that those educators that are out there right now.
So tell us really quickly, because we have to go to another show, and this has been jam packed. We'll do a part 2. Calvin, how does someone reach you real fast?
At bridgetolife.net. I can be reached at bridgetolife.net and at 410-419-4975.
Okay.
Bridge to Life.
I hope Anthony took that down.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do
Well,
you
we're going to wrap
travel
up.
around the country and speak to teachers, school administrators?
Just on a small scale at this particular point, because I'm really building my business at this particular point, making sure that I'm able to support. And, when you're developing a business to support persons like and such, and what our goal is, you got to have some data behind you. So we're building our data platform as well as we're supporting young people, school districts, and families.
Well, this has been fantastic with you, Calvin Bridgers and Donna Christensen, and myself, Linda Dorman. Thank you for joining us today. And that's bridgetolife.net on our TV.network. Thank you for joining us for the health, wellness, and lifestyle. We're going to bring you back so we can continue. Very important conversation.
Thank you very much.
Have a good
Thank
afternoon.
you.
Well, I wonder if we have